excited to welcome you here this afternoon for our reading. I'm Tori Weber, Associate Director of Programs and Fellowships at the Kenyon Review. Before we get fully underway, join me in silencing your phones and devices. And before I introduce Ruth Awad, who I'm so excited to be welcoming today, I do want to take a minute to talk about some of the other events we have going on this week. We are now fully in the midst of the annual Kenyon Review Literary Festival, our 13th annual literary festival. And we have events happening every day this week, so I hope you will join us at some other events later this week. Tomorrow at 4:30 in the Community Foundation Theater, we have Cultural Malaise, Writers on Social Responsibility and the Rhetoric of Change, featuring Ruth Awad, Kea Parsonen, Orchid Tierney, and Ira Sakrungrong. And that will be mostly a panel discussion, but also kind of a reading. All of those writers will be reading some of their work and talking about how that work addresses the social responsibility of the writer, and then having a discussion with a little Q&A. So I think that will be a super interesting and exciting event. On Thursday at 4:30 back here in Cheever Room, we will have a reading with Dawn Davies, who is the GLCA New Writers Award winner for fiction this year. And then Friday at 8 p.m. in Brandy Recital Hall is our keynote lecture, An Evening with T.C. Boyle. That's at 8 p.m. Friday, and he will be signing books after that event. So I hope you will join us for all of those. We also have books for sale after this event, and after all of our events. So bring your money and buy some books. I am pleased now to introduce Ruth Awad. Ruth Awad is an award-winning Lebanese-American poet whose debut poetry collection, Set to Music, A Wildfire, won the 2016 Michael Waters Poetry Prize and the 2018 Ohioana Book Award for Poetry. She is the recipient of a 2016 Ohio Arts Council Individual Excellence Award, and her work has appeared or is forthcoming in Poetry, The New Republic, the Rumpus, Crab Orchard Review, Southern Indiana Review, the Adroit Journal, and elsewhere. Her work has also been anthologized in numerous collections, including New Moons, Contemporary Writing by North American Muslims, Making Mirrors, Writing by and for Refugees, and the 100 Years' War, Modern War Poems. She writes and lives in Columbus, Ohio, with her band of Pomeranians. Please join me in welcoming Ruth Awad.
Hi, thank you all so much for being here. It is a pleasure to read for you tonight, and thank you, Tori, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you, Elizabeth, for helping coordinate, Tori and Elizabeth coordinated all the wonderful activities that we're enjoying this week. I have a lot of Pomeranians. Like, picture how many a lot means to you. I probably have a couple more than that. Why Pomeranians? I don't know. They're very strange. They're strange, small, manic dogs. And I think I respect that about them. Anyway, this reading is not about Pomeranians. I'm going to start out with a couple poems from my collection, Set to Music, A Wildfire. I guess kind of some background on the book. I interviewed my father to build the arc of this collection. My dad grew up in Tripoli, Lebanon during the Lebanese Civil War of the 1970s and lasted through the early 90s. And then he immigrated to the United States, where he met my mom and had family, all that good stuff, and was like very much pursuing the kind of quintessential American dream. So the collection is kind of based on the interviews that I had with my dad, the things I learned about his history and our history, and yeah, I'm just gonna get into it. The only thing you need to know is that some of the poems that I'm going to read are written in the first person from my father's point of view. They are persona poems, including this first one. Let me be a lamb in a world that wants my lion. In the beginning, there was an angel with cloven feet who stood by me. And the angel said, my wings are an ocean. And its shoulders split until feathers fell around us. This is how you leave your country, on the back of an ocean, choked with feathers. If someone gives you water, drink. And if they hand you a glass of blood, tell yourself it's water. If they hand you a lamb and say, eat, they will see a lion. They will call you lion when you walk down the street, when the towers come down, when blood is the water they drink. When my belly sings with hunger, it's asking, will you die for an idea? I dreamt I walked the shore of my country and each wave cracked like a bone. The sea of my childhood rattles with skulls and their mouths agape with my name. Drown its vowels. Call me S. Say it's a name the sea spoke when I dragged my feet across an ocean and became somewhere new. I call my dead beloved, but they have too much time for me. If I close my eyes, I see my father on the beach, his hands cupped for water. He says, the dead are always thirsty. And I wake up in time to catch the L for work that hardly keeps me fed. Heaven, leave your light on a little longer. I looked for you on earth and found my daughters. I looked for you and saw your stars strung electric as sorrow, and they wound my current across their backs and carried me here. The middle of a grocery store parking lot, the whine of floodlights burrowing into my capped head, and the black night ahead, and I think, my God, will I ever not be surprised by what I can survive? The long country of my loneliness stretched out before me, my hands heavy with the food I can eat. I'm so full of honey in a time of war, winter in a land I'm learning to love, in a land that won't love me. That's why I have to talk about Pomeranians, you know? Keep it breezy. So the fare does not get much lighter from there because this is about war, baby. I'd be disingenuous. One of my obsessions in writing this collection was interrogating the cost of survival, right? We hear a lot about the cost, like the cost of life in war, right? But I was curious about the cost of surviving something like that. And so that is kind of what led my conversations with my dad, who I like to mention at every reading I give that involves this book, was so generous with his time and with sharing that portion of his life with me, which growing up with him, he kind of kept locked away, I think, out of a sense of trying to protect me and my two sisters from that side of his life that, like, being born and raised in America, we didn't have much exposure to, right? Interview with my father. Names. When someone dies in Tripoli, we write their names on paper next to their pictures and post them where others can see. Walk the street where names wave from the walls, flutter from windows, buildings gild with sheets. Breathing paper, beating paper, the streets are paper, and we don't know who we're going to see. Whose face will call out from that collage, the hundreds of eyes glancing all around, as though we could lift them from the pages, as though we weren't born into war too, as though our religion, blood bright, in the hands of a checkpoint guard, a flapping wing of paper, won't tack us among them, the raised, their names, white light. Are we doing okay? Okay, good. So I mentioned that this collection was based off of those interviews that I had with my dad. I would be remiss not to mention that I came into this whole process pretty ignorant, right? I was doing research about the Lebanese Civil War. I've read a lot of books. But there's nothing I could have looked up to bridge the gap between my privilege, having grown up in a country that has not seen war on its soil in my lifetime, and my dad's experience, the trauma of living through war in his country. And so, I asked some questions that in hindsight I wouldn't have asked. For example, and this is something this next poem kind of grapples with, I asked my dad, who did you want to win the war? Which, fucking American much? Who asked that? And he was like, I only wanted my family to win, thanks. Understood. So anyway, ignorant American, I learned, now we can all learn from my bad experience. Good, moving on. My father is the sea, the field, the stone. I don't know what makes a country a country. If the sea softening an edge of land is enough to say this is mine, and that is yours. There were nights in Tripoli when there was room for us, when the sky pulled up the wings of gulls and we watched their bodies rise from the beach. Days when I chased my sisters through the market and we sailed through bright saffron scarves, past barrels of grain and earthy bins of pine nuts. And how I stood beside my siblings, all dressed in clothes my father made stitch by stitch, and held out my hands for the candy he'd bring if work was good. It was a lot to ask, and still I asked. Some days, I'd swim out until I wasn't sure I could come back. The sun beat its indifference into my brow, the water, its mercy. Why choose a coast when my hands are stone? Why a rifle when my blood is a field? I carry these suitcases full of rain because I can't take my country. If it's a choice you want, I've never known a world that wasn't worth dying for. Another thing that the book gets into, just gonna check the time here. It feels like I've been up here for 5 centuries, but turns out it hasn't been that long. So the second section of the book is when my dad meets my mom, who's like the polar opposite of my father in every conceivable way. Like, my dad is very practical and very strict, and my mom is just this free spirit. After she and my dad divorced, she became a tattoo artist. That's my mom's speed. It's kind of a miracle that they ever got along well enough to have me and my sisters. Good for them. It's a lot of information about myself, but I guess I put it in the book, so whatever. It's already public knowledge. Anyway, this was a long tangent and way of saying that my parents also grew up in different religious homes. So my dad and my dad's side of the family, all Sunni Muslim, and my mom's side of the family, Southern Baptist. It's a long way of saying I have a complicated relationship with religion. This next poem is loosely about it, kind of, maybe. The Keeper of Allah's Hidden Names. When I looked up, the clouds muted the bulb of moonlight ore. They wisped like scarves around the neck of a woman. That perfume between light and darkness, and I was still counting. I counted the white cloth canopies pinned to the mountainside, blustering there as though they could drip down the stone wall like water and wash away. That water jeweled with blood. Your names like the sea's broken glass. I was counting when you looked down on your animals who leaned into your breath with wonder at the wind stinging through their ribs. Was counting when you pulled the moon down into the sea, a pearl on the tongue of an animal too stupid to swallow your name and keep it there. Was counting from the cliffs every syllable of light and water and leaf and bone. braying your names like an incantation against the loneliness of knowing you. Alright, if it's okay with y'all, I'm going to read some poems that are not in a book. Maybe never will be. Don't ask me how my second book is going. Writing a second book is like the most daunting thing I've ever done in my life. Do I recommend it? No. I don't want to read that poem. Okay. Catalog of the Inalienable. My father said he gave me this country. Whatever you can mourn, you can love. One day I'll step into the light and be devoured. I'll turn it over in my hands, bewildered. It will be like that first brisk winter he didn't miss wind and olive trees. I must love my country because I mourn it. Agree each hour to live another one. I ache the way sunlight aches. It is very American to be this sad on a Tuesday. To grow mean like a boxwood untaming the window. I'm so greedy now I want everything. Marvel the blood. Expect the algae that blooms an age of ice. Sometimes what you love will kill you. It will rough your mouth like a kiss. So I've referenced the kind of home that I grew up in with like very split kind of identities between my mother and father. One of the choices that my dad made in raising me and my sisters was that he never taught us how to speak Arabic. So it was something that his family, whenever we'd visit our family in Lebanon, would take it amongst themselves to be like, we have to learn Arabic. And like, it was a huge thing between him and like his siblings. And they're like, why aren't you teaching your kids Arabic? Like, we can't talk to them. Anyway, so this poem is kind of about that. Learning Arabic. Suspended in the teleferique above Harissa, I see our salt white lady reach for Beirut. Language is both the cedar shade and mountain road. The bay licking the heels of Junia. My auntie teaches me the Arabic word for cat. My American tongue and bare legs say I'm Lebanese only in blood. She wants me to learn. If not for cables, we would drop to our deaths. If not for blood, we'd be untethered. What saves us is the one small thing. A cable, a call to prayer, a new word strung like a pearl in the mouth of a girl. I'm editing up here, okay? There's a nice note here that says breathe. I didn't put it there. But it's a good reminder, right? We should all breathe. I don't know what to say about this next poem other than I'm a poet, so I write a lot of sad poems. There you go. That's it. In the gloaming, in the roiling night, the hurt returns as it always intended. It is tender as the inside of my thighs. It is as blue too. O windless, wingless sky, show me your empire of loneliness. Let me spring from the jaws of what tried to kill me. Let me look at your face and see a heaven worth having. All your sorry angels falling off a piano bench, laughing. Do you burn because you remember darkness? Outside, the joy is clamoring. It is almost like the worst day of your life is ordinary for everyone else. Okay, hey, I've put you through a lot of poems, but I'm intentionally saving my one somewhat uplifting poem for last. Ooh, I shouldn't have said that. It's not that uplifting. I guess the only thing you need to know about this next poem is if I'm the only Lebanese person you've ever encountered, like, sorry, because we're great. A. B. I have yet to meet a Lebanese person who does not believe that the world does not begin and end in Lebanon. Like, we are just those people. And that's very much true of my dad, so this is an absolutely true story. All the oranges of Tripoli. It is not enough for everything to stem from Lebanon, no, my father contends. It was Tripoli where oranges first originated. And if my sisters and I had any doubt, just look at the Wikipedia entry for oranges, my father says, his gap-toothed grin widening not unlike an orange split open. Just look. And like magic, whose origins I'm told are also Lebanese, there for the world to see, unassailable proof that oranges come not from South China nor Spain, but Tripoli. And I know my father is not beyond editing Wikipedia. Did you know Wikipedia may well have Lebanese roots? And his research may be scientifically unsound, a story heard from an uncle or a cousin, but this is absolutely true. Once, there were vast orange orchards in Tripoli, and when they were in bloom, the whole city smelled like citrus. It was like a beautiful woman's perfume. It was like you could smell sunlight. And during the war, and after, and every time Tripoli burned, imagine the fruit peeled in your palm. Now imagine the fruit is a city. It was unlike anything, he says. I'm telling you, anything. Thank you all.
Are you up for it?
Sure.
A little Q&A?
Yeah. Yes.
Have you ever had like a reader or a listener tell you about their interpretation of your poem that was not what you intended it to be? And if so, how did that strike you?
Sure. I'm having a hard time thinking of like a specific or humorous example. Someone told me recently that my poetry seems very irreverent, and I was like, that is not an adjective I would use for my work, but yeah, I think sometimes, you know, people bring their different backgrounds and histories to the page, and you can't really control how the work strikes other people, so I try to like be understanding and like make space for it, but I'm curious why you asked.
Just, I mean, like, it seems like when you make something and then put it out in the world, and I don't know, I guess with all your like little prefaces, we have a very specific point of entry that not everyone would.
Yeah, and that's kind of the magic of seeing poetry read live, right? You kind of get the behind the scenes look at the poem and kind of the author's thinking and creating it. But yeah, I think as artists, the best thing we can do is like just try to make sure that our meaning is as clear as it possibly can be without giving those prefaces. And of course, when you write poems, there are some cues that you can give the reader. You can put your epigraphs to work and stuff like that, which helps too. But yeah, that's the hard negotiation we have to make, that we can't control how the work is perceived and how it's interpreted, so you kind of have to like trust your audience to bring that rigor too. Good question. Yes.
I'm curious, you said that, you published one book of poetry and that you wouldn't necessarily recommend publishing a second, but you're clearly still writing and maybe trying to do that.
Yeah.
Like, what do you feel like is still untold? Why are you trying to put yourself through that again?
Oh, this is such a good question. Why are you doing this to yourself? Well, masochism. Yeah, I'm definitely not writing the same book. Like, this first collection is a very specific thing, and hopefully my second collection will be a very different thing. I think that my second collection is very much veering more lyric, maybe a little bit more experimental, and very much more like my interior world, whereas my first collection was very much obsessed with like kind of unearthing this family history and like heritage. So it's a little bit more personal and less global in that way. Good question. Yes?
In the genesis of your poems, did you find that the theme found the poems or the poems found the theme? Like, I'm curious to know if you set out with the idea that I'm going to write almost like a cycle or a sequence of poems.
Yeah, so Set to Music Wildfire was very much a project-based collection where I knew that I wanted to write about the subject matter. I had like the beats of the narrative arc mapped out before I ever wrote these poems, so it was very like, I don't want to say it was formulaic, but it was like very, almost obsessive in like how much planning I put into it before I actually wrote the poems. And because I'm super type A and a Capricorn, I think that worked out well for me. But I'm trying to do something completely different with my second collection and not like put those kind of restraints on myself, which is probably why I hate it so much. Thank you for that question. Other questions? We can also talk about my dogs. Just throwing it out there. Yes.
What are their names?
That is a great question. Okay. So the youngest one is Winnie, and she's real shitty. Like, she would, respect me saying that. And then Asher is the newest addition to my Pomeranian family. He is like, his waist is as round as mine. He's like a human Pomeranian. And then Bowie is the other one, and she's like very old, very delicate. And then the other Pom is Bub, which is short for Beelzebub, because he is Satan. He's like the meanest, worst animal I've ever met. I love him to death. But he bites everyone. He's a huge liability. I hope this recording doesn't make it out so my insurance company sees it. Her rates are going up. Anyway, yeah, thank you for asking about my dogs. Very obsessed with them. Other questions? Yes.
Did you start out with one?
I did, yes. So in addition to the 4 Pomeranians I just named, there are 2 ghost Pomeranians who are no longer part of this realm. And yeah, I started out with just the one and then kept adding. I have this theory about sadness and grief, and it's that if you pile enough dogs on it, it becomes tolerable. Try it, yes.
I don't have a question about your dogs, I've got a question about your poems. I just wondering whether you could talk about your how you navigate the difficulty of positionality in your work, particularly when it comes to persona poems, and how do you sort of I don't know. You do it so brilliantly, and yet I'm wondering about your process, about how you do navigate the position of where you are here in this country towards maybe another identity, which isn't your own, but you're speaking nearby it. So I'm kind of curious whether you can say a little bit more about that.
Yes, this is such a great question, and actually, I've taught workshops on this in the past, so it's very much my wheelhouse. So I think that working in persona is very complicated, right? We have to make a lot of negotiations with ourselves as far as, do I have a right to speak from this point of view? Why am I speaking from this point of view? What can I accomplish from speaking from this point of view versus my point of view? Because we don't want to take the microphone away from someone else, right? We don't want to speak for the voiceless because that is a very, gross idea. And, you should just pass the mic, usually. That's my thinking. So whenever I talk about persona in this book specifically, my answer is maybe oversimply, if my father were a poet, I would never end this book, right? But I felt like I wanted to tell my father's story, and I wanted to do it in a way that was collaborative, which is why these poems were based on interviews that I had with my dad. My dad has read every poem in this collection, every draft of these poems. We fact-checked them together. So I felt very confident in that I wasn't taking the mic away from my father, but instead it was kind of this collaborative, like almost family undertaking, right? He feels that it's important that people understand the civilian side of war in the hopes that maybe we don't do it as often, which, you know, the dream. But yeah, I think whenever you're working in persona, it's very, very important to ask yourself those questions about, you know, why you feel compelled to tell it from this point of view versus your own. I feel like persona can create an urgency that third person doesn't necessarily, which is why I chose to write a lot of these poems from my father's point of view, you know, based on like him just telling the story to me. I kind of wanted to recreate that in the persona poems in this collection. Like, my father's actually sitting down and telling the story. Does that answer the question? Yes.
Do you feel like writing a persona poem has changed you?
It's definitely made me interrogate the form more than I ever would have before. I've always been drawn to persona poems because I think that it can be an underutilized form in poetry, the storytelling aspect of it. And again, I like how persona kind of creates that intimacy between the speaker and the reader. It's like you're inviting the reader to lean in close and to listen to this story. But as I was saying, it's made me think about appropriation and kind of like my responsibility as a literary citizen to not engage in appropriative behaviors and to not step on other people's toes or take stories away from them. So yeah, I feel like this project has at least forced me to think more critically about that work. Yes. All your hands went up at once. Let's just go down the road. Go ahead.
How did your relationship with your dad change while writing this collection? And then how did your relationship with your identity change while writing this collection?
So that's a great question. A lot of this project was trying to get closer to my Lebanese identity. As I mentioned, my father made the choice not to teach me and my sisters Arabic, I think in an effort to better assimilate and to try to make our lives easier, which, you know, whatever. But taking an interest in this and asking my dad these questions and conducting a series of interviews, I think made him feel like he could open up to me in that way and make himself vulnerable and talk about these traumatic experiences and have that kind of like, I don't know, make it so I could better understand him. I mentioned that my dad was very strict, and growing up, like, that was very, very true. But having this understanding of what his childhood was like helped me understand why he made the choices to raise me and my sisters in the way that he did. And I think it was very much out of this want to protect us. So I think that really helped with our relationship.
Do you think your American identity informs your work equally as much as your Lebanese heritage?
Oh, I think probably more so. If I'm being honest, like, I'm in the stew of America, you know, every single day, day in, day out. And it's the culture that impacts my daily life more than anything. So I'm constantly thinking about my American identity, the privileges that affords me, the things that super frustrate me about America and its position in the global culture and community. Yeah. And also, like, it took me a long time to study Lebanese poets. Like, I didn't start reading poetry by Lebanese authors until I was in grad school, so, like, yeah, I didn't grow up with that kind of literature in my background, so it's very much a learning experience for me. Thank you. Yes?
I was wondering what the reaction was of either family members who are native Lebanese or other native Lebanese people to your poems, but also to other Lebanese-American people, if they've responded to your poems in some way and like talked about that.
Yeah, I think this book has helped me find that community in a lot of ways. I started getting much more involved with the Arab American community in writing this project, and after the book came out, I've had really good conversations with other Lebanese-American poets who are also trying to write about the war and kind of like grappling with how to go about it. My family is super supportive. Like, they're all very excited about the book and excited at the prospect of people learning about the war in the West, because I feel like, I don't know, in history classes in the US I didn't hear about the Lebanese Civil War. Not sure if that's true for anyone else, but so yeah, they're very happy that like this kind of history is being shared, maybe, you know, in a way that it probably otherwise wouldn't have. So
Maybe one more question?
oh, it has to be a banger, a lot of pressure.
Yeah. Yeah,
How did you choose the title for your book?
Oh man. It comes from a line in a poem in the collection that came to me in a dream. I'm sorry. That's like something you learn never to do in workshop, but worked for me. So. Thank you all so much for your time and for your wonderful questions.